If the New York Times is willing to torch its own credibility just to take down Zohran Mamdani, that tells you one thing. They know how dangerous Mamdani really is to the entire system. The New York Times just ran what it thought was a damning report about Mamdani, the 33-year-old rising star from Queens who just pulled off a historic upset in the Democratic primary for mayor. Their article, seemingly published to shed some light on a shady moment in Mamdani's past, alleged the now Democratic nominee for mayor checked off boxes for both African American and Asian on a college application almost 20 years ago. Since then, the backlash against the New York Times has been fierce.
That's crazy. The New York Times trying to Zohran so hard.
Embarrassing. They're absolutely embarrassing.
They're a mess.
When you're doing shit like this, you don't deserve to be called the paper of record.
It's just the latest in the New York Times campaign against Mamdani, which has become so obvious it's frankly embarrassing. New York Magazine ran this piece before the election. The Times leads the movement to stop Mamdani. And The Guardian just published this piece. Is the New York Times trying to wreck Zohran Mamdani's mayoral bid? Written by the Times' first female public editor. So why does the paper of record seem so hell-bent on stopping Mamdani? The answer has less to do with the college application and more to do with the paper's deep loyalty to the system Mamdani is trying to change. Before the city's Democratic primary on June 24th, the New York Times, which is supposedly unbiased, took a decidedly biased stance against Mamdani. The paper's editorial board, which usually endorses candidates in major elections, decided not to endorse a candidate in this particular race. Instead, they actually told people not to vote for Mamdani, claiming he didn't have enough experience. The Times did not issue a similar warning for Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York who resigned in disgrace after being credibly accused of sexual harassment by 13 women. To be fair, it's not uncommon or unethical for news outlets to have political opinions or endorse candidates in races, and it may not seem like a pattern until you see what they've published since he won, a hit piece based on a college application. They reported that Mamdani, on an application to the Ivy League school Columbia University, had checked off 2 boxes for race, African American and Asian. But here's the thing, Mamdani was born in Uganda, which is in Africa, to parents of Indian descent. He told the Times that he was simply trying to communicate his background since there wasn't a box for Ugandan Indian. He said the application didn't allow for the complexity of his background. He went on to say that no, he doesn't consider himself black or African American. Still, despite this clearly being a minor trivial detail that happened some 20 years ago, Mamdani's political opponents pounced. Eric Adams called it deeply offensive, and a spokesman for Andrew Cuomo said there should be a full investigation. But seriously, most people immediately saw this for what it was, a minor detail that wasn't even false. Besides calling out the Times for making a mountain out of a molehill, critics have also slammed the Times for how they got the story. Apparently, Mamdani's confidential application to Columbia was given to them by a racist conservative activist who illegally stole the info in a hack. The hacker was granted anonymity by the Times, but was later revealed to be a far-right proponent of eugenics and race science, and was hacking into Columbia to see if they were still using affirmative action, which the conservative Supreme Court has ruled illegal. There's a serious ethical question about journalists using illegally obtained information in their reporting, and most news organizations will only do so if the information is significantly newsworthy. Just last year, the Times refused to publish a story based on hack materials targeting J.D. Vance because it wasn't newsworthy. But for Zohran, a nearly 20-year-old college application suddenly is. But here's the big picture. This isn't about a single story or a hacked college application. This is about rich people being scared over a Democratic socialist riding populist rage to a historic electoral victory. In addition to the Times story, top Democrats have refused to endorse him. The New York Post is on its own crusade against him, trying to dig up anything and everything from his past, including his actually impressive SAT score, and billionaires say they'll bankroll anybody to run against him. It's all part of a long campaign. The capitalist owners of this country have spent the last 100 years trying to intimidate and scare anybody who dares challenge the system that keeps them rich and powerful. And the New York Times, the paper of record, the old gray lady, is the official mouthpiece of that movement. This isn't just bias, it's a pattern. For over a century, the New York Times has used its power to delegitimize anyone who challenges capitalism, from Eugene Debs and Paul Robeson to Bernie Sanders and now Zohran Mamdani. During the Red Scare, they backed loyalty oaths and blacklists. When the white left was crushed, they turned to targeting the black left, painting black Marxists as dangerous and violent. Again and again, the Times has used its power to protect the system and punish those who threaten it. Zohran Mamdani isn't the first person to scare the powerful, but he may be the first in a generation with the momentum to actually change something. The fact that the New York Times is willing to risk its own credibility to undermine Mamdani says a lot, not about him, but about how threatening he is to the system they serve. Don't be fooled. This isn't journalism. It's damage control for a dying system. For Notice News, I'm Andrew Springer.